Hey, what's up, my friend? And welcome back to episode 10 of the Meditation and Mindfulness podcast. And in this episode, I'd like to talk about the lost art of feeling. What is the lost art of feeling? Is it like the lost ark? Well, it could be. There could be a treasure trove of things, or not. What is the lost art of feeling? Well, normally when we think of feeling, we think of our physical sense. We have the five senses, and within the five senses, we perceive and experience the world. And largely, most people are navigating and working within the five senses in their experience. So when I talk about feeling and how it relates to an art form and how it relates to meditation, what I'm talking about is a more subtle feeling that's beyond the five senses. Some may call it the sixth sense, and it could be very well related to intuition, subtler sensing of finer levels and more subtle levels of energy. And it's a very important skill and ability to cultivate because it is a lost art. And it's mainly because the world that we live in focuses on the body, focuses on the five senses, focuses on experiencing and navigating and, making it through with fulfilling our sensual desires. We're constantly seeking entertainment for the eyes and ears. We're seeking delicious foods for the palate. We're seeking sweet aromas in the perfumes and smells, and we're seeking a certain sense of gratification through touch. And through all the sensual pleasures that we seek throughout the world and life, there's one particular problem in that you think the more you get of a certain thing, the better. The more, the better. But that's not always the case with the five senses. And there's a sense of satiation with the senses. And satiation is when you get too much of a good thing and it begins to turn into not such a good thing. One example that my teacher used to always use was, let's say you like apple pie and you get a slice of apple pie and it tastes darn good. Well, gosh, if that first piece tasted good, well, the second piece is going to taste just as good, right? And you eat that second piece, and you notice it's just not quite as good as the first. Well, heck, 3 times a charm, right? So I get that third piece of apple pie, and by that point, I start to feel sick. So this is a perfect example of overload of the senses can be problematic in that you can't just keep fulfilling the senses and expect to be happy. So, where is happiness found? Happiness could be found in the more subtler and more refined experiences of life. And these are found through the lost art of feeling. Now, how it relates to meditation, and in particular the meditation that I practice and I teach. And this particular meditation involves focusing and concentrating, and more importantly, feeling the chakras. We have 7 primary chakras that run along the spine in an ascending order. And the way that I like to systematize and classify the chakras is root chakra, sex chakra, navel chakra, heart chakra, throat chakra, third eye chakra, and crown chakra. So in the subtle body, the energy body, the non-physical body, also known as the aura, these are where this is where the chakras are located. They are energetic in nature. They're non-physical, but they're in form. There is a form, so there's a subtle physicality to it. Even the physical body is not 100% solid. As science tells us, we are made up of energy. And it appears to be solid because of our perspective. From the perspective that we're viewing our body, mostly we are conditioned to believe in its solidity. We're conditioned to perceive it as solid. And that's simply due to conditioning. And conditioning is a repeated, habitual pattern of sameness that keeps us, let's say, locked up in a particular range of experience. So conditioning is an obvious environmental process. You put someone in a particular environment, they become conditioned by that environment, by the experiences and interactions in those environments. Put someone in a different environment, and you're going to get a different conditioning. You're going to get a different experience. You're going to get a different person out of that. Now, conditioning is something that is not permanent, although it can seem to be quite permanent in its repetitiousness, if that is a word. It can seem to be like a prison in its effect, but it's a prison that can be broken out of with training, and this is why we meditate. If we were born in a perfect world where there wasn't any type of conditioning that, let's say, took us out of our pristine perfection, that if we lived in a world that didn't focus on just the body, if we lived in a world that had love and wisdom and knowledge of our multidimensional reality, then perhaps we wouldn't need to meditate. We would have a natural ability, and we do have a natural ability to know ourselves, to know who we really are, to know the truth of life, or at least it would be a heck of a lot easier to get into and maintain a meditative state or a state of higher consciousness. So this is why we are drawn to meditation, because we sense that there is a more finer, subtler plane of reality, and where perhaps there is more happiness, more love, more light, more enjoyment, more fulfillment than what is found here on the physical planes. Because we know the physical plane is sort of a temporary manifestation, and therefore we can't put too much stock and lot in it because it's impermanent. And to put too much stock in an impermanent thing, well, would be somewhat foolish to lay all your, to go all in on the physical. Now, of course, the physical is extremely important, and you should put a good amount of your efforts into maintaining a healthy body, having a good environment, which includes, being healthy, being around healthy and happy people, exposing yourself to positive influences such as through the media, avoiding too much negative influence as much as we can, and cultivating a healthy body and a healthy mind. So, but because we intuitively, those who are interested in meditation, we intuitively sense that there's more than just this physical experience. We seek meditation. And through the experience of meditation, and in particular, this particular meditation technique that I like to practice and share, there is a good emphasis on bridging the gap from the physical into the more subtler dimensions of energy, of light. And just to get a good idea of sort of the layout, the lay of the land of what I'm referring to, there is a sense of, now this may take a particular leap of faith, but there's a sense of a beyond. There's a sense of a better place. There's a sense of a dimension where there's less suffering. There's a sense of a dimension where there's more permanent, eternal light, bliss, love, perfection, whatever you want to call it. Now, this may not always be on the forefront of our minds because it's very easy to get trapped up and caught up into the physical, sensorial, seeking gratification cycle. And, my take on it is just manage it. It's not something that we need to avoid. Enjoy that bowl of ice cream once in a while. Have a slice of that pizza here and there. Because a lot of times when we get a craving for something, it's better to just go out and if it's an easy craving to satisfy, just satisfy it. You'll begin to see that it wasn't such a big deal. Recently, all with all this funny little story, with all this hype in the media about vaping, I was recently interested in experiencing what it's like to vape some nicotine products. I'm not a smoker. I don't like cigarettes. And, nicotine always kind of made me nauseous. But for some reason, I just had this curiosity, and I had to go out and try it. Because, I've heard of the nootropic use of nicotine, that it's a mild stimulant, kind of comparable to caffeine, and that it can enhance cognitive ability, concentration, and all those good things. So I figured, what the heck? Even though I don't like cigarettes and I don't like smoking, I will be happy to try vaping some of these nicotine vapes. So I went out and got one just out of curiosity. And it's like, I knew I probably wouldn't like it. Intuitively, I sensed this probably is not a great idea, but the curiosity was strong enough for me that I just, and the ease of getting the thing that I wanted was simple enough that I just went out, bought one, took 2 puffs off of it, instantly felt the rush, and instantly felt like shit. And that was it. I gave the vape to a friend of mine who used to be a smoker, and now he vapes nicotine. So, the fact is that we live in a world where if we do have a curiosity, if we do have a craving, it's not such a big deal to go out and just satisfy it. See if there's something there for you. And if there isn't, you'll know immediately. And there'll be no more craving of it, and it's over, it's gone. So if there's something simple like that we can kind of get out of our system, we're craving that bowl of ice cream, go have a bowl of ice cream. It's not going to hurt you. It's not going to kill you. The problem with that is when you begin to become irresponsible with these things, when they're unmanageable, when the craving gets so strong that you can't satisfy it, or it's something that is a constant craving, or it's something that just cannot be managed responsibly, that's when it becomes a problem. And so just keep that in mind, that obviously exercising some discriminative discipline is important when it comes to these cravings. But don't be afraid to go out and have a sample, have a taste of the world, because that's why we're here, It's not to avoid the world. It's not to be afraid of having a little piece of pie here and there, but it's just to know that these things are temporary and they're not going to make you happy. They might satisfy a little craving for a few moments, and that's okay once in a while. Sometimes our bodies need that. we're dealing with different dimensions of ourself. We're dealing with a physical body, we're dealing with an emotional body, a mental body. Beyond that, who knows what. All sorts of classifications have been given to us and handed down to us over the generations and millennia of the various classifications of the higher self and all the different, the Atman and Brahma and all the different, more subtler and more real dimensions of the self. But I think simplification is important, at least in the beginning. I'm a firm believer that as long as we get going with something like meditation, that ultimately meditation and our own true self, our own heart and life becomes the teacher. And as long as we have faith in ourselves and we trust our feeling and we know, when to say when we're going down, let's say, the wrong path, it's okay to turn around and be like, okay, I tried that, didn't work. Not going to waste my time doing that again. You get the idea. It's easy to get caught up in classifications and systems, definitions, and labels. But I think it's more important to just get to a point where your meditation discipline, your meditation practice becomes your method of interfacing with life's reality, with the truth of life, with as real of a sense of the depths of yourself that you can get to. And if you reach a certain point where you need help, then obviously a spiritual teacher, a meditation guide, a meditation coach, someone who's gone down the path a little further than you could definitely be helpful. And if you're a total beginner and new to this and just interested in the topic of meditation, then a meditation teacher is absolutely helpful, whether that be someone you find online or someone you found in person. I know for me, and I've told this story before, I encountered meditation. I was interested in it, but I encountered meditation through my martial arts teacher. So I learned at a young age, by proxy, basically how to meditate. I went to him to learn Kung Fu, but he happened to also teach meditation. And I knew that because my interest in Kung Fu was based on the interest in self-mastery, that meditation just made absolute sense to become aware of and ultimately be responsible for, and perhaps one day master the more subtle and more refined dimensions and aspects of the self beyond the body. We're talking about the emotions, we're talking about the mind, we're talking about the thoughts, and the various levels and depths that the mind can, contain. So, when you come to something like meditation, it's because we live in a world that's largely focused on the gross physical plane. So even within the gross physical plane, if you think about it, I like to envision like a triangle and like a pyramid, for example, with the base of the pyramid on the ground and the tip of the pyramid at the top. And the base of the pyramid, you'd have the longer width at the base, and at the top you have just a fine point. And as we ascend the pyramid, you see that the width of each triangle gets smaller and shorter as we ascend up to the top of the pyramid, up to the point. So this is a good example of how gross physical and getting into more subtle or energy planes can be seen in a geometrical example or symbol. At the base of the pyramid, you have the longest length of a side, right? That longer length would represent sort of like a long string, for example, on a harp. So if you look at a harp, you have the long string, the bass, boom. And that's a slower vibration or slower frequency than the shortest string on the harp, which has the ping, ping, ping sound to it. They're both producing vibration, but why are they different? Well, it's because of the string length. It's because of the frequency. It's because of the wavelength. So the longer the wavelength, the slower the frequency. The shorter the wavelength, the higher the frequency, the faster the frequency. And as you can see at the top of the pyramid, the point becomes the still point. And is there an end to the still point? Or does the still point just go on eternally and forever? Well, maybe we'll never know, my friends, but we can only try to ascend the pyramid, to climb that mountain. And getting back to the point, we have in meditation, while we ascend the dimensional spectrum, the higher frequencies, the higher dimensions, the higher states of consciousness, we're literally increasing our frequency to a more subtle, more refined plane of feeling. So you can look at the senses and the sensorial gratification as a gross physical plane. It's a low frequency. It's at the bottom of the base, the pyramid, right? And then you could look at, let's say, when we begin to meditate and we begin to feel, and as we tune in with our awareness to the non-physical plane, we begin to feel the more refined and more subtler planes of our being. And it begins, and the chakra system is a great example of this, because I'm a firm believer that we are internal alchemists when we begin this type of meditation process on the chakras. When we focus on the lower chakras, we are tuning into, let's say, lower frequencies, more raw, closer to physical planes of existence. As we ascend up the chakra system and the energy rises, the kundalini ascends up as we concentrate higher and on higher chakras, the level of frequency increases. The energy becomes more refined, it becomes more subtle, and our ability to feel on more refined planes increases. And so, as we do this, it's like ascending up, climbing up to the top of the mountain, to the top of the pyramid. And the view that we get from the top of the mountain, from the top of the pyramid, is like no other. It's a perspective change. It's a perception change. And it's a dimensional change. When we view life from the highest dimension, we see everything as one. We see everything as beauty and as whole. It's only when we recede and fall back down to the lower dimensions in our perception and in our perspective that we begin to see separation, that we begin to see duality, that we begin to classify, define, label, judge, separate what is ultimately one whole into the many diverse plethora of things and experiences. It's like dividing. The mind divides. It's very good at dissecting and labeling and classifying things. And humans are very good at that. And so we create these systems. We create the complexities of life. And if you look at a tree, for example, it seems to be a very complex, being. It's a very complex living thing. I mean, look at the multitude of fine lines and veins and branches and leaves and buds and flowers and the intricate bark and et cetera, et cetera. But if we just reverse engineer that tree and we remember that tree came from a whole seed, just one little seed contained the entire tree. And that tree slowly grew from the seeds to the first, separation of the first stem and leaves and root systems, and begins to separate and reach out and move out into the world and diversify and expand and separate itself. But if we really, and it looks fairly complex as a mature tree compared to where it started from as a young plant, or we've all seen that seedling video, that slow motion video of the seed breaking open and becoming that first stem and leaves. And there's a pattern to that. There's a mathematical pattern, the Fibonacci sequence, from 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, etc. There's an unfolding that occurs in nature based on a mathematical sequence, but it all comes back to 0 and 1. It's a binary code, yin and yang, full, empty, and ultimately one. Because that tree, even though it looks diverse, complex, and you can trace it all back to the trunk, you can trace that back to the seed in which it originally grew from. And just like the tree goes off on a marvelous tangent, I also tend to go off on marvelous tangents. So getting back to the seed, the root, we're talking about the art of feeling today and why that's so important. Well, have you ever felt a tree before? Our ability to feel on these more subtler and more refined planes of energy is our bridge to the multidimensional universe. When we're locked up in the physical senses and we're only perceiving the gross physical, and we're locked up in sensorial and sense gratification constantly, we never feel beyond the body. So meditation is the training that we use to bridge from becoming a sensorial being to becoming a feeling being, our ability and a being that feels more to life. And it's this training that we uncover the true beauty and sense of not only who and what we are and our abilities and our makeup beyond just the body, but it opens us up to a magnificent multidimensional world that has always been there. It's always been part of us, who we are, but we've just been conditioned. We've lived in a world that doesn't necessarily acknowledge that there is even beyond the body, and any type of reference to other dimensions or planes of existence or life after death or anything like this is typically taboo, especially in the West. Perhaps in the East and in India and Tibet and such, it's a lot less of a taboo subject. And of course, there's more mainstream knowledge and experience and wisdom in the cultures of those areas. But it's funny because the world seems to be adopting more of a Western mentality, and has been adopting a Western mentality for the last, 100 or so years, in the Industrial Revolution, in the technology revolution, and such. And science has become such a religion that most people adopt as their belief system, that they've nearly pushed away completely any type of spirituality, any type of, alternate views of the world, of life, that they've forgotten that there's more to life than just the physical senses and what we see, hear, touch, taste, etc., and smell. So when we begin to this, this meditation journey, a lot of times it seems very mental, in that, it's our thoughts that are in the way, it's the mental chatter. So what do you do in that circumstance? Well, my recommendation is to learn how to feel. It's called the lost art of feeling, because like any art or skill, we can develop it. We can remember how to do it. We can get better at it. We can, build it, and so typically when you start meditating on the chakras, it begins with first an ability to concentrate, to just hold your attention on that area. But in reality, what it needs to be is the ability to feel that area, to put our ability to feel more subtle and more refined energies. And as I illustrated earlier, that dimensional spectrum, in the beginning, we might not have a very refined instrument to feel, because we're so used to the gross senses, and our bodies perhaps might be polluted with the chemicals of the world, and our body itself might just be a manifestation of a lower frequency because of the foods we eat, because of the environment we're in, because of perhaps the lack of exercise that we do, etc., etc. But just as you can improve the physical body's condition through exercise, through proper diet, drinking water, being around pure areas that aren't polluted, and limiting yourself to chemical exposures, etc., just as we can increase the health of our body, we can increase our ability, our endurance ability, we can increase our muscular strength, we can increase our flexibility, we can increase a whole host of things on the physical level. We can also improve our sense of feeling, our sense and ability to feel on a more refined, more subtle level of energy. And this becomes quite necessary to bridge the gap in meditation practice. If you're new to meditation, the type of meditation that I practice is just sitting still and feeling the chakras in an ascending manner. Now, this is also referred to as Kundalini meditation, because when you're concentrating and feeling a particular chakra, what may occur is the Kundalini energy, which is the latent energy kind of stored dormant in your root chakra. The Shakti, as it rises through concentration ability, you may get a Kundalini arousal at a certain point, or maybe in the beginning. You never know. It all depends. It all depends on your experience. It all depends on your environment. It all depends on your condition. And all of that depends on your karma, your experiences, your conditioning, your environment, your exposure to things like meditation, etc. Perhaps your past lives, My teacher used to always tell us that if you're drawn to meditation in this life, chances are you practiced in other lives. And to the degree in which you meditate well is typically to the degree in which you have meditated before. And typically, in every lifetime, we kind of pick up where we left off in the last life. And that there's no, knowledge of past lives, who we were, where we were, and what we did isn't necessarily important. But what we attained in terms of level of perception, in terms of our spiritual development, does carry over into the next life. And in terms of our awareness, how conscious we are, at what heights of consciousness did we experience in the last life? Chances are that will return to you in this life. Maybe not all at once, but perhaps at a certain point in time when we grow up, when we have a certain experience, when our energy level reaches a certain height, because it does all revolve around energy, doesn't it? And I've used this point before that if we're having a low energy day, if we're in a bad mood, if we're tired, it could be very difficult to sit down and meditate and have what would be considered a good meditation, because energy is everything. And this is why, in terms of certain practices, certain occult, certain spiritual practices, the conservation of energy is of prime importance. The ability to not lose energy if we don't have to. The ability to gain energy when we can. The ability to not only cultivate and retain this energy, but then refine it, purify it, use it in order to get into higher states of consciousness. I mean, one simple way to look at it is if you're a coffee drinker, you know how you feel before you have that morning cup, right? And then you know how you feel after, right? So that's a good example of how energy affects your perception, affects your mood, affects everything. So, my teacher was very big on an energy analysis. Where are you losing energy in your life? The places you go, the people you interact with, the things you do, the things that you expose yourself to in terms of media, the things that you say in terms of words, the thoughts that you think, the emotions that you allow yourself to feel. All of these things affect your energy. And you can lose a lot of energy by being in the wrong place, by being around certain individuals, by doing and saying certain things. Now, just the opposite, you can gain a lot of energy by being at the right places, by being around certain people, by thinking certain thoughts, by exposing yourself to certain things, by doing certain practices like meditation, by exercising, eating the right foods. It just makes sense. What we're doing is we're cultivating an energy field. And through this energy field, we perceive the world. So part of the cultivation and the refinement of this energy field involves bridging from a sensorial, let's say, energy to a emotional type of energy that we are feeling. Now, in our energy body, in our emotional body, in our aura, where the chakras are, this is where our emotions are felt. Our ability to feel this energy body is our ability to bridge the gap to other dimensions. And this isn't a topic that's widely discussed in the meditation world. I'm a big believer in concentration. I'm a big believer in focus. I'm a big believer in the mental aspect of holding your mind at a certain point. And I practice this in the meditation, the single-pointed mind meditation. But that's just the beginning. The ability to hold steady your concentration on one point, that's just a prerequisite. Then what do you do? Once you can kind of do that, Then you want to work on the feeling, the lost art of subtle feeling, the ability to feel that chakra. You're moving into a whole different plane beyond the physical body. This is what I consider the sixth sense. Now, the sixth sense can be, and of course, as I've stated before, there are higher senses that have been classified, beyond the five senses. There have been yogic systems that have classified the higher senses, etc. And you can look those up. But just to keep it simple and basic for now, when you begin to isolate and be able to feel, let's say you're focusing on your heart chakra, and just the ability to hold your attention at that point undistractedly is step one. And that's where the concentration ability becomes important. And that's why I recommend warming up your concentration ability by using a visual concentration device, whether you're looking at a candle flame, whether you're just focusing on a yantra, which is a geometric design where you focus on the center dot and you hold your eyes, basically using your dominant sense, your eyes, in order to enhance or warm up your concentrative ability, your ability to hold your attention on one point and unwaveringly with a laser-like focus, with a balanced approach, both intense and relaxed at the same time, finding an equilibrium, a perfect balance. It's very important. Once you've got that down, and then you can transfer that ability to holding your attention on a chakra, then you want to open up your ability to feel. Your ability to feel the energy. And the first thing that I like to do is do a sort of like an energy reading of the area. Once you've isolated your awareness there and you're able to hold your attention there for extended periods of time, unwaveringly, you do sort of like a check-in, an energy analysis, an energy reading. Well, what's the current state of that energy? Is it blocked? Is it open? Is there already a rush of energy around that area? Is it feel numb? Is it very difficult to feel? All of these experiences might be yours. And it all depends on your experience of meditation, the state of your, physical and your energy body. A lot of people could have energy bodies that are pure and pristine. And that could be dependent on a lot of factors, meaning they're very positive people. They're not around a lot of negativity. They were brought up in a progressive environment that was happy and loving and non-abusive, and they've been pretty pure and healthy all their lives with the foods and things they've ingested and not ingested, and et cetera, et cetera. These people exist. You could have a pretty pure energy body. Or conversely, you could have a pretty impure energy body that's been abused from a lot of negativity, perhaps growing up, perhaps being around a lot of negative, unhappy people, being around in a very toxic environment, which could include literally not just toxic people, but toxicity from chemicals in the environment. If you grew up in an inner city, perhaps, and there's not a lot of nature around, and the air quality is not very good, and you're simply exposed to a lot of industrial and chemicals and exhaust, etc., then all of that can affect not only your physical body but your energy body as well. So it's or any spectrum and shade of gray in between can be your particular circumstance. But the good news is just as you can enhance the health, strength of your physical body, you can also enhance, and purity, you can also enhance the purity, health, and strength of your energy body. And by purifying it, by meditating, by just tuning into it, you'll begin to break up any blockages that might be there. Your ability to just tune in and feel, and just attempt to feel, is a very important step. And as I said, you might just be numb. There might be a blockage. A lot of people are blocked up in their energy and their emotional bodies. But through meditating, through exercising, through perhaps some breathing, qigong, pranayama, even just physical exercise, one of the things my teacher always told us was that running is a great way to purify your aura. Sweating, believe it or not. Have you ever had sort of just like this feeling of a heavy emotional blockage in maybe your gut or your heart, and you go out and you do an exercise and all of a sudden the energy breaks up and then the light shines through and you feel good again? Well, this is why it's important. And because we live in a world that's not so pure, perfect, and pristine, it's important to have these daily maintenance type of exercises, this daily maintenance practice of meditation, of exercise, of right living, eating the right foods, saying the right things, exposing yourself to the right people, and avoiding the negative things as much as we possibly can in this world. And if we do have to undergo or experience or go into some sort of negative situation or bad side of town or whatever it might be, you can also be ready and prepared for that when you meditate. Because if you keep a very tight mind that's very focused, then a lot of times these things won't affect you as much. And there are ways of, let's say, quote unquote, protecting yourself. So, it just harkens back to the importance of the daily practice. So the ability to feel, the ability to feel on more subtle and more refined planes of energy, this lost art of feeling, is extremely important. And I hope that you see its importance and that you will find a way to feel again. And if you need help with that, feel free to reach out. I'm on Facebook. You can look up Rob Zaremba, ROBZAREMBA, or find my Facebook group, Meditation and Mindfulness, on Facebook, and or just direct message me, and I'm happy to help. Getting into a daily meditation practice, using this particular meditation technique, will help you feel again. Ultimately, keeping your energy body, keeping your aura in shape, is extremely important for the experience that we're promised in meditation. It's not just about keeping the mind clear and clean, but also the emotions. It's great to have peace of mind, but it's even better to have peace of mind in parallel with a blissful feeling, a feeling of love, a feeling of joy, and ultimately a feeling of ecstasy. So with that, friends, I wish you well, and I hope you're out there meditating. And we will see you in the next podcast. And again, thanks for listening on Apple Podcasts or watching on YouTube. And thank you so much. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.